You're probably thinking, no way this guy quit Dragon Soul. It's his whole entire life. And I would say to that, you're 110% correct, okay? There's no way I'm quitting this game. Even if there's one player, I'm that one player. But I am very frustrated, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. My frustration with the game. And I'm going to cover a range of topics. And I'm not alone in this. My good friend Vibin is going to share his insight on a few topics of his own. This is supposed to be a Zenkai Soul, next to Beast and God Soul, but is on the level of Legendary Souls. It got nerfed to the ground in the last Halloween update. Everyone was under the impression that this change was only for the duration of the update. Now Saviour is completely useless. Its trade value is disgusting. No one uses it during raids. If you get a Saviour, you're gonna treat it the exact same as an uncommon soul. And this is what ruffles my feathers the most. Noelia says we're just going to restore the timer back. And this was on the 14th of December. It is now currently a Sunday on the 26th of January. I can understand as a developer, it's hard to know what kind of bugs or updates you should prioritize or what you should put most of your energy towards. And that's why you guys do things like polls to help you make that decision. But if you said you was going to do something, just get it done. You've had this long. It took you within the duration of the event to nerf the soul. So why is it taking you this long to put it to how it was before? I'm going to interrupt this video to announce that I'm going to be streaming more, and much more in fact. After the first stream, I've had this feeling in my chest just gravitating me towards wanting to stream more. Okay, these streams are going to be planned out. They're going to be amazing. If you want to know more about future streams, go and check out my Discord or turn on post notifications, because I will be announcing it in the community tab on my YouTube page. Now back to the video.
PvP, as of now, is a small part of the Dragon Soul community. Since the day rank was added to Dragon Soul, there's been talk of a combat rework, which still hasn't came to the game and really hasn't been worked on. But combat has always been a mess in this game. It's not as simple to where you can just hop in and play similar to a Battlegrounds, nor does it have any depth even among the top players, as everyone runs the same meta. If you're a beginner in PvP, there's no learning curve. Majority of it is due to new players playing the same. Most of the people you fight just mash, and since you're fighting people like that for so long, that's the impression you get off of Dragon Soul's combat, and thus how you play from then on until shown otherwise. You really don't learn. It's hard to tell what's right or wrong, since the game's combat isn't coherent in the slightest, and you would need a god or someone to teach you. Even if you learn how to play, there's so many random interactions that you wouldn't expect to happen, which can make or break a match. This leads to some players cheesing matches to win, which can leave a negative impact on all new players. As for the progress on the rework, it seems like we're never going to get it, which is understandable, since Dragon Soul is a PvE game first and a PvP game second. On top of that, this rework will also most likely affect the PvE side, which brings up one of the problems being compatibility between the two modes. Devs mostly focus on the PvE side of the community, as that's what most people play. But it's been a whole year. We've gotten update after update filled with nothing but 2x weeks and random updates. At least we can get is a semblance of new combat, which the last one of those tests was 2 years ago, and it felt horrible. Even now, they still don't know what to do with combat, and their idea is the same as 2 years ago, which generally has me worried for when those updates come out.
Rapid assemble. This move has been touched and abused in its time. The androids that spawn used to be permanent. Now they just despawn after a while. You used to be able to spawn multiple pairs of androids. Now you're only allowed one pair of androids at a time. If you try to do any more, the previous ones spawned in will just despawn. The point is, there are all these changes to this one move, but none of the changes are to make this move actually usable. It's a 1 or 2% drop from a hard gyro raid, and it's just completely useless.
Dragon Soul's progression is just like any other bandit beater. The only difference from other bandit beaters is that Dragon Soul tries to incorporate story elements into its progression, especially in the recent storyline, in which they switch from bandit beating to actively focusing on story. Now this is good. It's nice to see that they're straying away from what they're previously accustomed to. Although the way they implemented it wasn't the best, it still shows that they're trying new things to improve the game's quality. That being said, doesn't fix the issues with progression leading up to it. Most Dragon Ball games link your progression with forms. This is mostly the case with Dragon Souls as well, but unlike other Dragon Ball games, you don't stay with your form very long, as by the time you're on your second or third tier of mastery, you'd already be at the next form. Even the last form of LSSJ isn't even used for that long, as you end up replacing it with an aura that takes less time to master and is stronger than the original. This leads to most forms being completely irrelevant for progression. as you only need a minimum of 3, optionally 4 forms to complete the game. Since a technique like Kaioken surpasses all forms up to Tier 2 Mystic in terms of damage. The progression throughout this game is somewhat healthy, though the same can be said for some parts of the game. One of the main struggles throughout the game is Zenny. There are 2 instances of a Zenny reset. The first time is when you speak to Gohan to obtain Mystic, in which he only needs 50k Zenny, but in reality, anything above that threshold gets taken, so if you have any extra Zenny, it will all disappear. Another instance of this is again by Gohan during the Super Saiyan God storyline. To recruit him for the ritual, you need 500k Zenny, which is another big sink, as most players don't recover from the previous reset. And since they have to use their Dragon Balls to continue the storyline, they can't wish for more Zenny until after the cooldown. This leaves late game players in debt, having no Zenny to spend on things like moves, which are important, especially when moves cost up to 10 million Zenny, not accounting for upgrades, and beans, which are very important when it comes to doing raids, Kaioken mentors, and trading. Beans are very scarce in large quantities, as it costs around 300k Zenny per bean at the vendor, which you can only buy 2 per spawn, as well as being bought at the crystal raid shop in a bundle and individually, costing up to 70 raid crystals, 50 for the bundle and 20 for 2 beans, before going on cooldown. This leads to beans being high in demand, but supply can't keep up, which leaves players coming out of the late game high and dry. With the amount of beans needed for parts of the game like Kaioken trading, it's obvious that there needs to be a change in the supply among players. There are many things I could mention that are wrong with progression, but I feel like I've made a point in what I'm trying to convey.
Let's bring it back to what I was saying about the polls. I think polls are a great thing. They let the developers know what they should focus on first and what they should prioritize. But it gets to a certain point. What content gives you the best reason to play Dragon Soul? And an overwhelming amount of people chose transformation reworks. Please, if you vote for this, please explain to me your reason. I just want to understand. How is this a reason to play Dragon Soul? I just don't get it. They reworked the Super Saiyan 2 transformation. Is that going to make you do more Broly raids? Like, are you like really? And of course, some of the responsibility lies on the devs as well. You have the data, you know what pulls in the most players. You know that when there's a new Souls update, much more people play the game. Think about this. You're the parent, okay? And your kid comes to you and says, I want to run away from home. He's feeling a bit rebellious. Then you say, okay then, run away from home. He packs his bag, he runs, and then comes back crying and complaining because of the choices that he's made. This is the exact same thing that's going on right here. People are choosing what they want implemented in the game. Then when it drops, you're going to see people complaining because they spend all their time on transformation reworks instead of something people actually want. So honestly, the way these polls are structured are just useless. Why would anyone continuously play the game for a transformation rework? That doesn't even make sense.
For as long as Dragon Soul has been around, there have been many promises that have been made to the community that still haven't come to the game. We've had events like the Easter election and photo contest, which were both big events for the community. For Easter, we were promised 500k GP in the form of election, in which we will vote for our candidates, and depending on their standing at the end of the election, the candidates were given a certain amount of GP to give away to their supporters. The most voted candidate getting 200k GP, while others got 75k GP. This was a fun event that a lot of people participated in. We even had a core hearing which I was a part of. Despite all this though, the event ended with no GP being given to candidates, and the event being swept under the rug. Even though it was brought up multiple times to developers, it never finished, and with 2 of the top candidates being banned, the event was effectively cancelled. Even though there was a few months gap between them being banned and the election finishing. At 100k members, there was a photography event hosted, in which members could win GP and a spot showing their work in game. With the Chapter 1 update of Super Saiyan God, the tavern was added, and behind the Fragment Quest NPC, there was a wall of framed photos. But they only had placeholders instead of displaying the submissions provided. These events are one of many things that have been promised to happen, and have never came to the game. Even the smallest thing, like a shirt, haven't been added to the game despite already being finished. And it seems like we've forgotten about these things, even though they had ample time beforehand to add or finish these events.
Now onto something more recent. which also links back to what I was talking about with the polls. Before we get into that, please let me know if you actually struggle with getting Dragon Ball and why. Is it the hunters in the server? Do you not have the Dragon Raider Game Pass? Is it because you're playing on mobile, console? Let me know, just so I can understand why this poll is like this. And because of this poll, it led Noelius to say I think being able to summon Dragon Balls daily is pretty fun. For actual rare ones, we can later have Super Dragon Balls with Legendary Plus guaranteed and other perks and some 1 a month cooldown. Daily Dragon Balls. This just sounds to me that everything is just going to be useless. Zenny's going to be useless. Everyone's just going to have a whole bunch of Zenny. There's going to be influx in SD. SD trade value is going to go all the way down. Everyone's going to have SD. Everyone's going to have all the souls. The market is just going to crash. But to combat this, he did say the other wishes were going to be nerfed. But the Dragon Balls are already not worth it to collect and use. So they're just going to be completely useless. And for these Super Dragon Balls, it's just going to create the same issue that we've been having with the normal Dragon Balls. No one's going to be able to get them. So instead of fixing the actual issue, you're just creating more issues. The only good idea that came from this discussion was the talk about pity. Changing the pity for souls from 10 to 3. It just makes sense if people are struggling to get Dragon Balls, to reduce the pity.
Balancing has never been a strong suit of Dragon Soul. A lot of things get nerfed or changed, sometimes seemingly without our knowledge. Souls have gone through a lot of changes, especially Saviour, from being one of the best souls to being one of the worst in this pool. There are a lot of reasons as to why it became worse over time. The main reason is balancing. During the Halloween event, there were some changes to make raids harder. One of these big changes was nerfing God and Saviour to only last 30 seconds in raids. These changes still remain today. On top of that, the damage for these souls were significantly nerfed. For God's Soul, this was fine, since it already had strong multi-hitting moves. But for Saviour, these changes were detrimental. Since Saviour's most common out of Zekai rarity, it was fairly common to get them, therefore depreciating its value. But souls aren't the only feature subject to this balancing. Moves are a core part of the game. We've only had a few changes to moves over the course of this game's lifespan, but there have been some pretty big changes to moves, like Hurricane Blade. There's also moves that have been completely forgotten, like Rapid Assemble. For Hurricane Blade, it was a great tool for early and endgame players, as they could pull in groups of enemies together. This also worked on raid bosses, allowing you to stun them for a short time. It wasn't that strong, and actually helped a lot of people who couldn't find groups to solo raids. But there was a change that removed its ability to pull in raid bosses, which wasn't even in the patch notes for the update. This change was not necessary. It only made it harder for new players to get into raids, and this was before souls were added. Along with that update, there was a change to Sandra that made it so you could only use one max. This was reverted later on, but at the time it made it even worse to attempt raids. For Rapid Example, it came with the addition to the Insane Jiro raid update. It allows you to summon 2 NPCs that will fight independently of you. The problem with this move is that it summoned very weak NPCs that did no damage and had very poor AI. Throughout all the changes this move went through, it didn't get buffed once and stayed the same even though it was a 0.5% drop from the raid. It seems like every major update something will get changed that isn't mentioned, or that things that are mentioned are either nerfs or changes that do more hurt than help.
If you made it this far into the video, I just want to appreciate you. And to conclude, I'm going to end with a point. And even though you may not agree with most of the things said in the video, I think most of us can relate to this. The lack of communication is probably the main thing. We don't know where the game is headed. We don't have any roadmap. We don't know what's the focus of the devs right now, nor if they are progressing on anything like bug fixing or the upcoming updates. Me personally, I 110% agree with this statement. And this is something I've been complaining about, okay? If you saw my last video complaining about the game, you will hear similar things in this video. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video or stream.